Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Scope podcast. I'm back with more NBA news, NBA hypothetical that most people have been having, for probably close to a decade now, almost. But it's that debate of the 2017 Warriors against that 96 Bulls team. So we know the 17 Warriors were pretty much unstoppable with Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, even having Draymond Green as that emotional leader. And then the 96 Bulls, of course, they had one of the, most considered the greatest player of all time in Michael Jordan. But then you had one of the greatest two-way players of all time in Scottie Pippen with Ron Harper, with, guys like Tony Kukoc, Dennis Rodman, and others, legendary head coach Phil Jackson. So it's going to be a tough matchup. And most people think it comes down to eras, which year or which decade are we playing in, because that will determine the rules and the physicality and things like that. I don't think that matters because the numbers are the numbers, the physical gifts are the physical gifts. And I think the Bulls team, that 96 Bulls team, is one of the best defensive teams ever. Just a prime Scotty and Mike and Dennis Rodman with his rebounding and defensive tenacity, what he was able to do. And then you just had their wingspans was outrageous that you had to deal with, and the hand size of a Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen of his length of covering the field, pause, and what he was able to do. Um, just it was amazing. You probably won't see a backcourt like that again, or a team assembled like that again, especially in an era where they didn't have as much freedom to seek trades and to have the leverage that players in NBA have today to move around. So you probably won't see a team like that again because it will demand too much money, and the salary cap would be too, they would have to pay too much over the salary cap. So you probably never see a team assembled like that again. And you probably won't see a team assembled like the Warriors again either, because Kevin Durant took a pay cut to go to that team to win championships. And you probably won't see another player do that again. I think Kevin Durant did it because he made a lot of money. He knew he still can make money, in the future, so he can make up for it with endorsements and things like that. But I think players are not going to take a pay cut like that anymore, just because the NFLPA probably wouldn't allow him for one, and the league probably wouldn't allow it because that Warriors team was so dominant. But when you consider that Warriors team, that 27 Warriors team against the Chicago Bulls, you're thinking about the matchups, right? Because the Bulls were a great team, but they have to deal with three of the greatest shooters of all time. You have to deal with Steph, Clay, and KD. Now, most people have Steph as the greatest shooter of all time, and then you have Clay, who most consider top three, and then Kevin Durant is probably in that top five somewhere. So you have three of the top five on the same team that you have to deal with. And most people say, well, the 96 Bulls struggled with the 96 Jazz with Karl Malone and John Stockton, who wasn't great shooters and didn't shoot three pointers, and they have to deal with that. But styles make fights. The Jazz were able to make the matchup with the Bulls ugly because they had physicality, they had a slow game pace, things like that. The Warriors going to play up and down the court, but I think the Bulls can slow them down no matter what era it is because just the length that they have in a wingspan. It'll be difficult for them to get shots off. Um, they can get through screens. The Bulls played in an era where they fought through screens and they were able to um, play pick and roll a lot better than they can now because they had to deal with Stockton and Malone, who were two of the greatest pick and roll players ever. So pick and rolls wouldn't be a thing for them. So I don't think the physicality or eras matters because Chicago's just too long of defenders to deal with. So and they cared a lot about defense. The Warriors were great or good on the defensive side, but I think they relied a lot more on outscoring teams as their defense because teams were trying to catch up with them when they were shooting three pointers, and eventually the teams just shot themselves out. But they never were locked down defenders. Kevin Durant had the length as well as far as great wingspan, but he never was a lockdown defender. You could probably run circles around, especially a Jordan. Jordan would be able to get his shot off because he was just so quick, so creative, and so athletic that he would be able to do that. And Scottie Pippen, he would have to deal with a Scottie Pippen on the offense on the defensive end because Scottie Pippen is probably height wise is similar, especially with his wingspan. He could defend a Kevin Durant like no other could. So that would be an interesting matchup. But the matchup everyone wanted to see was Michael Jordan against Steph Curry because Michael Jordan has about 3 inches in height on Steph Curry, but he's physical as well. But even if they played in today's era where the physicality wouldn't be allowed, Jordan would just be so uh, he would be such a great defender on Steph that Steph wouldn't be able to do much with him. And most people would say, well, Steph probably would guard a Jordan. I think Jordan would because Jordan would want the best player. Scottie Pippen would definitely have to take Kevin Durant, and then of course Draymond and Dennis Rodman will be an interesting matchup because of their antics and stuff. So maybe this match wouldn't even make it all the way because there'll probably be a fight before the end of the game. But those matchups would be great. But I think uh, the Bulls, their length pause would be too much for the Warriors because the Warriors played a lot of small ball. Most of their players, with the exception of Kevin Durant, were under 6'7". So um, Jordan at the two was essentially the same height as Draymond, which is crazy. But then you got Scottie Pippen, who's about 6'9" or 6'8". Then they had true 7-footers, like Kukoc and stuff like that. So I think it would just be too much for the Warriors. They would basically have to shoot threes because they wouldn't be able to drive in the paint at all. It wouldn't be any room in the paint for them to do that. And we know that Ron Artest and people like that have frustrated Kevin Durant in the past, and Scottie Pippen would be on a whole nother level because he's just, you know, he's only probably like an inch or two taller than Ron Artest um, in reality. But with the wingspan Scottie Pippen would have, it would be very frustrating, even for Kevin Durant to get a shot off because Scottie Pippen could jump with him and he can do all of these different things that would frustrate him back in, and even in this era. I think Kevin Durant would still average over 20 in the series just because he's just that great and be able to get to the free throw line, especially in this era. But I don't think it would matter much because they wouldn't be able to score enough to compete with the Bulls, even though the Bulls wasn't the highest scorers because of the era that they played in. But I think in this era they would score way more points and they would just, Jordan could average probably 40 in this era easily. Because if other players are averaging 30 regularly, Jordan with the free throw line that he didn't get back in his era, it'll be way worse than what it is now. So, um, and then Runner Harper, I think, was just another piece that most people aren't considering because he can guard a Kevin Durant, he can guard a Klay Thompson, he can take those players out of the game, and their length across would just be so devastating. It'll be like what the Clippers were supposed to be with Pat Bev, Kawhi, and Paul George, but it didn't happen that way. But tell me your thoughts about who you think would win a hypothetical matchup between the Chicago Bulls and the Warriors. Of course, the '96 Bulls and the 2017 Warriors. And until next time, I'll see you next time.